They're here. Or are they? Let's talk about that. Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on the Brian Nichols Show. Thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you live from our BNC studios here in lovely Eastern Indiana. And to help address the question, yes, are aliens in fact here? Are they amongst us? Returning to Conspiracy Corner, Aidan Mattis. Welcome back to the Brian Nichols Show.
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Doing good, buddy. Good to have you back in the show. What's been new over in your world and over at the Lore Lodge?
We're just off of a YouTube not liking me very much ban because I decided to cover Sound of Freedom. So that went great. We started talking about it, and then suddenly two of our videos did about a third of the normal views. And then ironically, the video on Sound of Freedom that we put out, which is almost 2 hours long, I will say off the bat, if you're looking for a video that covers both sides, the allegations against Tim Ballard and OUR, as well as some of the bullshit that Vice put out, I will recommend my video for that. The reason we did it is there was not a video on the internet that did it. So ours is very balanced. It looks at both sides of the issue, addresses the claims from both groups. There's some stuff that OUR, Operation Underground Railroad, definitely did the wrong thing on. There's also some criticisms from groups like Vice that are complete BS. So if you're interested in any of that, go check it out. We could use the views. But yeah, so we were like, how do we bounce back from that? What's something we haven't covered in a while, but something that did really well back when we first did it, something from before the channel became a big deal. And we settled on Skinwalker Ranch because while everybody knows it as Skinwalker Ranch, the majority of the stuff that allegedly happened there is more UFO oriented than it is Skinwalker oriented. And with everything that's been going on recently in these last few weeks with these UAP UFO hearings, we were like, oh, well, we should cover this. We should roll it all into one. And so that appears to have been the right thing to do based on the YouTube algorithm. But I thought I'd kind of get started here by talking about Skinwalkers and Skinwalker Ranch, because there's a massive misconception here around what those actually are.
Yeah. What is a Skinwalker? Like, I've heard the term, but I've never really dug into the mythology of what it actually is.
So I'm sure you've probably seen little like memes and videos about them, but like based on what you've seen, what would you assume this is? Would you like?
It's like I don't know what to call it, besides a thing that can turn itself into something that will try to lure you into some nefarious position or situation where it can then attack and destroy you, eat you. I don't know, like something like that.
It's actually a lot more on brand than a lot of the people have it. The version that I was seeing on TikTok in 2021, which was different from the version I came across on like iFunny, 4chan, Reddit back like 10 years ago, was, oh, your dog is behaving strangely. Skinwalker. The Amazon delivery driver, Skinwalker. Like,
okay, I did see that.
It can transform into anything at all that it so chooses. And no, the version I was familiar with is that this is a like cannibalistic shape-shifting monster from Navajo folklore, which almost, it turns out, and I had to get corrected on this by a number of Native American folks who I'm actually grateful to for telling me, hey, you have this wrong, because a lot of what I do is not necessarily, hey, look at this spooky monster, aren't you scared? I'm more of a cultural comparison kind of guy. I look at what's the same with this, what's different about this, what does this tell us about when these two cultures might have first interacted? Do they have similar folklore that defies the archaeological context? Questions like that are what gets me going. So those people corrected me, and I'm grateful. What it actually is, what a Skinwalker actually is, and again, this is still the best version I can give you. It might not be entirely accurate because it's a closed practice. Navajo don't love talking about this to outsiders because a lot of people don't take it seriously. But what I learned is that it's actually a more like a witch, a medicine man, a shaman doing a ritual that is referred to as bad medicine. So medicine in this context doesn't just refer to specifically, what we think of as pharmaceuticals. We're thinking of any mixture, herbal, potion, brew that's going to cause some sort of experience or effect on the body. So just more general, like drugs is kind of the term that gets applied to it now in modern English. I just don't want it to seem like we're talking about Native Americans out in the desert, doing all sorts of drugs for fun. This is a very serious practice. And what it is people will use magic to transform themselves either spiritually or physically, appearance-wise, into a creature of some sort. So the most common ones you hear are like coyotes, wolves, dogs. And what a skinwalker has to do to get to this point is there's a number of things. They have to be guided through the process by somebody who already is a skinwalker. So there's a community aspect to this, hierarchy, system of elders. It's all taboo, though. You can't talk about it out in the open. So you have to follow some steps.
There's just so much more to this than I thought there was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're just like, it's this creature that attacks and eats people. Like, no, Aidan's come in. It's like, no, there's a whole mythology to this, a whole backstory to this. Sorry, keep going, man.
You're fine. No. So yeah, you contact the elder, you get initiated, and the big step, the important part that everybody seems to recognize, the one thing I could find that is genuinely universal to this mythology is that you have to commit an act of violence and betrayal. That is generally the same act. The idea is you've got to kill a close family member, a friend, somebody who matters to you. You have to sacrifice that bond of love and friendship in order to be able to achieve the powers of the skinwalker, which again can range from you gaining the instincts of a given animal all the way through to physically transforming into that animal, depending on which version of the story you're hearing. So that's what skinwalkers actually are. They're not, and yes, they do those little things like calling out for help from the woods. And there are the, don't go whistling in the woods at night kind of things. There's all these little folklore stuff about skinwalkers that are actually pretty common to anything. But the specific stuff with these is that they commit an act of violence against somebody they care about. They then kill and don the pelt of the animal they want to take over the powers of. And then from there, it's a little bit more murky. And all we know about how to kill them is they don't like sage and cedar. And while a medicine man or a shaman might have more tools at their disposal, the average person is best suited creating a fire, burning some stuff down till it's white ashes, coating your bullet or blade in that, and then using that to kill the skinwalker, which of course you at that point must shoot it in the head or the heart.
Interesting.
So that's how skinwalkers work. And you might be wondering, how the hell does this have to do with the ranch? And that was the question I had even after looking through everything, because yes, there are some legends about this area in Utah, the Uinta Basin, being the path of the skinwalker, because back during the 1800s, the Ute sided with the United States against the Navajo, and the United States and the Ute collectively then sent the Navajo on their own version of the Trail of Tears, which only like half of them survived. They were eventually allowed to come back. And the legend, so it goes, I haven't heard this from an actual Native American source, but I've seen it all over some various folklore sites on the internet. The idea is that the Navajo cursed that land that the Ute drove them from to be the path of the skinwalker, to be infested with skinwalkers, and that they all live in this place called Dark Canyon, which isn't far from Skinwalker Ranch. And so there's this general mythos about skinwalkers in the area, but the story from the Sherman Ranch, Skinwalker Ranch, that is really always brought up here, that is specifically their very first day there on the ranch. They buy it from the Myers family. The Myers family had been there since 1905 and had reported absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. The Shermans get there their very first day. They're putting the cattle out to pasture, and they see a large wolf that walks over, a large wolf or coyote, it's unclear which it is, that walks over to the cattle pen and grabs a calf and keeps trying to drag it out, but it can't get it through the bars. So Terry Sherman and his dad run over and they start beating the thing. It won't let go. It won't get off. Terry pulls out a .357 Magnum and shoots it, and it doesn't let go. He shoots it a second time, lets go, kind of looks at him, and calmly walks away. Now, you shoot anything point blank with a .357, it's going to react
and do some damage.
And do some damage. In this case, the story goes, they shot it. It didn't even react. When they shot it the second time, it kind of got annoyed and left. And I want to be clear, there is very little evidence that any of the stuff the Sherman said happened actually happened. The cattle mutilations, yes, there's pictures. But the other stuff, the UFOs they say they saw, all of these wolf incidents, some of these like shining orbs that I'll talk about in a moment, I don't want it to sound like I'm saying all of this definitely happened and you need to care. I just want you to understand what the mythos is here. So yeah, but then they follow the coyote / wolf off into the distance, and the tracks just seem to stop at the tree line. It's as if it just disappeared. So that's odd. There's also an incident where Gwen Sherman, I believe is her name, the wife, saw a large wolf that was as tall as her sedan or as tall as her car, which it didn't say what kind of car, but even if it was a sedan, we're talking about like an almost 5-foot tall wolf. Wolves on average are 30 inches tall at the shoulders. That's huge. That would be a massive wolf. So that's a little odd. She also notes another canine. There's a couple other mentions of canines on the ranch, but that's really the only Skinwalker related stuff. Because yeah, if you were to encounter a traditional Skinwalker that can take the form of an animal and you were to shoot it with a regular steel or brass bullet, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to bounce off. The thing's not going to be bothered. Had they shot it with a bullet with white ash, then theoretically, if this is a Skinwalker, it would have penetrated. They have some sort of magical thing that they can't be harmed by normal weapons, but white ash for some reason breaks that. Interestingly enough, there's some burials that I cannot remember off the top of my head exactly where they were, but it was not the Navajo region. I want to say they were Algonquin of some kind, but I might be wrong. That what they found is there were very large skeletons, 6.5, 7 foot tall people buried deep underground, surrounded by a ring of normal sized people, 5'8" to 6 foot. And the taller skeletons, all of the skeletons, but specifically the taller ones, were coated in white ash. This is a completely different region of the United States, completely different culture, completely different folklore. So for some reason, it seems very widespread that white ash was seen as something that had to do with death in Native American cultures, which I find interesting. I don't know enough about it to know why that is. But when you get past the Skinwalker stuff at the ranch, it becomes clear that most of what we're dealing with here is spatial anomalies, UFOs, things like that, because they talk about 40-foot long box-like aircraft. They mentioned that there's been everything from cigar shape to round to cones, like very strange shapes, stuff that are 2 or 3 football fields long. And you look at a lot of it and you're like, okay, well, some of this stuff could have been blimps. Some of this could have been experimental aircraft. We're only 380 miles from Area 51. We're only 125 miles from Hill. So there's a few different Air Force bases in the region known for testing experimental aircraft. But they do talk about some stuff that I find very odd. And I want to, again, emphasize that a ton of this that they talk about does not have great evidence. And I don't totally trust Jeremy Corbell or George Knapp. I don't trust any journalists. I specifically trust even less the UFO journalists, because they are all very inclined to stretch the truth if it benefits them, in my experience, regardless. And that also applies for cryptozoology and certain folktale oriented communities. I don't want to make it sound like I'm just going after the UFO people. And I'm not even saying that I don't necessarily believe that there could be aliens. If I was shown proof that there were aliens, I would go, okay, there's aliens. I just am not like super into it. I'm not a coast to coast AM kind of guy. But they tell me
really quick, pause really quick, Aidan.
Sure.
I'm curious to that point. What would you actually consider to be proof of aliens? Like, what would you accept as proof?
I would be pretty hard to convince, especially with how far AI and deep fakes and all of that are coming. If you could get, I think I'd basically need to, I'd need to see the live video feed of them stepping off the ship and shaking hands with Biden. I think that would do it for me. If I saw that, I'd be like, okay, if it was live on multiple news stations, including independent media, you could get me there. But to kind of do a hard segue to the recent hearings, I'm completely unconvinced by these hearings, because what I'm seeing is them saying, did you find pilots? And they're like, were non-human biologics,
which could mean anything. It could be a cat.
Exactly. That's what bugs me, is like non-human biologics means there could have been atmospheric bacteria found on a very much terrestrial aircraft.
Right.
Like, also, that's not a response to the question, did you find pilots? The response to that would be, no, we did not find pilots, or yes, we found pilots. Not, there's non-human biologics. And it does not remotely for a second escape me that this comes out as soon as Trump's getting indicted yet again,
Right.
and Hunter Biden's plea deal falls through, the establishment is working overtime to make sure. Because here's the thing: the Republicans know they're screwed. Like, they know they're getting Trump. Like, they cannot kill Trump. Indictments haven't killed Trump. Nothing's killing Trump. The only thing that can stop Trump is whether or not the voters vote for Trump. So I think they know that they need to keep him under wraps. I think the Bidens are very aware of how bad things are. So I think they're trotting out UFOs again, just like they trotted out UFOs in April of 2020, just as we started to realize that a certain pandemic was not as under control as we thought it was. And prior to that, they rolled it out in 2018, around the same time that a whole bunch of Russian diplomats were expelled from 20 plus countries. And it goes back further and further. Every single time there is something important going on in the world that the US government wants our attention focused elsewhere, there's aliens.
So is it fair to ask the question, I guess, are aliens all contrived from the government? I mean, going back to 1947 with Roswell, right, when this whole conversation really took off, no pun intended, but like that would fit right in line with the creation of our security state, right? This is a post World War II world. Now you have things like the FBI, the CIA, eventually the NSA starting to grow and grow and grow, powers pretty much unencumbered, so they can do what they want. And with this, it makes a perfect cover story. So I guess I'm saying all that, Aidan. Is it necessarily a conspiracy so much to say that it makes sense that the government maybe not only uses the alien conversation, but dare I say, help create the conversation to help pull attention away from when things like Trump indictment, Hunter Biden plea deal falling apart, Biden scandal just starting to really catch on fire, like all these really important things pop up. It's no, look at shiny object.
Yep. I think that I would absolutely say 100% the government has used UFOs and aliens as a shiny object, a red herring to distract us from stuff. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that they started it on purpose, but there have been a number of different aircraft that we've tested that have not looked like aircraft in the typical sense. We have seen what the Nazis had, at least in terms of what their prototypes and their plans looked like. I think that it's very possible that what happened in 1947 was an experimental aircraft crashed near Roswell. And the government was like, we don't want anybody finding out about this because we don't want the Soviets knowing what we might have. That very much could look like the government covering up aliens. You get a couple of people who already believe in aliens, who see it all happen, maybe get in there, get to the newspapers, get some photos first before anyone else can kind of get the censorship apparatus fully going. And then what do you have? Well, the government can't comment on it because it was top secret aircraft that they didn't want people to find out about. There's absolutely no civilian idea. Like, we do not have the modern internet and the modern press. The average civilian had no idea what the government was up to. So you can very easily see a conspiracy wildfire start. And what can the government do? If it is aliens, the government can really only do two things. They can either completely hide it, or they can say, yeah, it's aliens, which opens up a whole new set of problems. And they then have to prove it's aliens. They have to show you the aliens. So if there's not aliens, there's really only one option. You can't say it's aliens, but you can't deny it's aliens without everybody assuming it's aliens.
Right.
So you have to take this weird, ambiguous stance where you're like,
non-human biologics.
We're not going to talk about it. We'll let you wonder, because it's better for everybody if the populace and Russia and China all think that Area 51 is looking at aliens rather than a nuclear missile that you can't detect.
Right.
They would much rather it be that. There's also a reason when you look at, Area 51, that it's got the kind of security it has, that, it's not, you can't fly over there at all without being threatened by F-16s. I feel like that level of secrecy only applies to stuff you're testing above ground. Because anything that they would be testing with aliens would be tested underground.
Right.
So it's more that they don't want you seeing whatever is going on in the air. in my opinion. So like I said, I'm not saying that aliens don't exist. But when I look at what's going on with the government right now, and I look back at some of the stuff that was said about Skinwalker Ranch, for example, one thing was that they saw orbs of light emerging from orange-rimmed portals that were just in midair. And of course, it's like, well, what is that? Because that doesn't sound like any sort of experimental technology I've ever seen or heard about. That one has me interested. Why is the focus on the big shiny object in the sky and not the portal commentary?
Right.
What's with somebody just created a wormhole on planet and we're not talking about it because we're too busy talking about the flying saucers? I think that the genuinely, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. I think we're looking for the wrong things. I don't think that a UFO is going to look like an aircraft we understand. Go back and watch Star Wars. Star Wars had giant death lasers in space. Star Wars had repulsor technology. It had VTOL aircraft. It had all sorts of stuff that was already being talked about. It did not have cell phones. It did not have plasma screen TVs. It did not have it didn't even have graphic user interfaces. We cannot comprehend the technology of the future. We like to think that we have ideas, and every once in a while we get something right. But we really don't know. And we're also assuming that aliens that come here, and the one thing I could see with the non-human biologics stuff, non-terrestrial biologics, whatever they said, the one thing I could see there is that we're talking about a biological drone, something that is organic matter that maybe even can think and process things through electrical impulses, but that isn't living in the way we totally understand it. If that's what they're talking about, now I'm intrigued. But what non-terrestrial biologics would have to mean to me is not, it's something biological that came from space. It would have to be, we can't classify that. We don't know what that is. If they came forward and said that, then I'd be intrigued. Otherwise, it just sounds like word salad to try and distract.
And going back, by the way, to the idea of aliens being contrived by the government, right? You kind of see the test case. So 1947 is Roswell. 9 years earlier, 1938, you have Orson Welles' War of the Worlds.
Yep.
And the reaction from the public was mass hysteria.
Yeah, they thought it was real.
Right, exactly. And I think that opened the eyes to powers that be, because all of a sudden they realized how, they knew that fear was powerful, but just how fear inducing the idea of an alien invasion, people from out of this world, little green men from Mars coming and invading, how that was able to turn everybody into mass hysteria. So if that maybe planted the seeds, and then all of a sudden have that in the back pocket to say, again, look at shiny objects. Stop looking at the actual things that are important, the things that we're working on behind the scenes, and instead look at the little green men, or at least believe that to be the conversation. Now, that doesn't change the conversation that you have folks out there like Steve, what's his name from the documentary, Steven Klansberg from Superbad. That's really funny. Steven, what's his name? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Pinker? That's the only Steven I can think of.
No, I'll look it up. You riff for a second. Let me look it up real quick.
Yeah, man, I'm just thinking about it, and on the one hand, I want to believe. I think it would be fun, but also I just see, like, when you think about when all of this is going on, all of this alien stuff is really peaking. It's all during the Cold War.
Stephen Greer, by the way.
Stephen Greer, got it.
Yes,
yeah, it's all during the Cold War, and it's, when you think about it, what would you prefer that the average person isn't thinking about?
Right.
Probably nuclear annihilation at the hands of the
annihilation. Exactly. Yeah.
So if you're not, if you want to keep I'm not using the term low IQ here as derogatory, but if you want to keep the low IQ people from freaking out about nuclear annihilation and asking questions, give them the UFOs.
Yep.
What you should really be worried about is those people up in space. Why don't you go look for them? suddenly you've gotten rid of an entire percentage of your population that's going to be asking questions that you did not have an answer to, nor did you have the capability to communicate what was going on to those people. There's just far too many possibilities.
Yeah. Well, man, I think this is something it's curious to keep an eye on right now because of the timing, and the insistence of having these conversations about aliens from the government, the ones leading the conversation, makes me raise my eyebrow.
Exactly.
It's the libertarian inclination. I think I'm just a little skeptical at my core.
Yeah, exactly. When being libertarian leads you to not believe in aliens because the government said they might exist.
It's that meme. It's like 2012 conspiracy theorists, aliens are real. 2023 conspiracy theorists, aliens aren't real. But truly, right? And you look at what the government does, and I guess this will be my final thoughts before I turn it over to you, Aidan, for your final thoughts. When you look at what the government does in its communication, or in many instances, lack thereof, with the public, in many situations, especially over the past 3 years, where we saw this firsthand, where government was telling you one thing, and then we see behind the scenes they knew and were acting on completely different information than they were putting out, right?
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's Dr. Fauci saying, wear a mask, even though months earlier he was saying masks won't do anything for a respiratory virus. He was on camera. He openly was saying that. He's saying it was a waste of time to try to use the cloth masks that you would find at, or you'd make at home. And you'd only really be able to use those high surgical grade N95 masks or better.
The very first political news and government statements I can remember are, and I'm not kidding you, the very first political issue I remember is there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
There you go.
I am 25 years old right now. The very first thing I remember as a 5-year-old boy politically was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The very first thing I remember about the US government telling me something is one of the most famous lies in history.
Yeah. And I still,
how was I not supposed to grow up like this?
Yeah, and I know people to this day who still stick to those original narratives, right? And it's because of the trust that your average citizen, I think, just implicitly gives government entities, because they were raised in this government education / indoctrination system where you trust the government. You pledge your allegiance to the country and to the government every single day. And this is just kind of like the world they grew up in, is that, this is just what we do, right? This is the way it's always been, which as a sales guy, that's like the worst phrase to ever hear any customer say, because I know that they just embrace the status quo. Whereas folks like you, Aidan, who go out and you do the work, you're questioning the traditional narratives, and you're bringing actual stuff to the table that, while it may, look at the stuff, you're going to question it yourself, and you're going to challenge it from a skeptic's perspective. And I love that about your show. I love that you bring that perspective and that energy, because I think you're more representative of the up and coming generation, specifically in Gen Z, where you see there is this desire for kind of like an understanding of why, instead of just government just does this. Okay, well, why? Right? Yeah. Actually starting to ask those questions. I really am hopeful to see that we continue down this path, especially with recent data coming out showing that there was a massive jump in high school men who are now identifying as a conservative leaning. Yeah. So that's something I think we should be keeping an eye on. But I think, with that being said, the UFO conversation, Skinwalker Ranch, yes, these are all things that it makes it easier to maintain the conversation, especially when you're the government perpetuating the narrative. But that's my final thoughts. Aidan, what do you have for us in your end?
Yeah, I mean, as for me, I think I think that there are some very interesting and compelling arguments for aliens, for extra dimensional beings, all sorts of really cool stuff we can look at. I just think that we also need to be very careful when we're dealing with this stuff to not fall for the obvious nonsense, the grifting, the people who are just in it to make a quick buck. There's some cool stuff out there. There's some legitimately unexplainable phenomenon that is public knowledge that they want to move us away from, so they keep pushing us towards the dumb stuff. That's why your TV is filled with entertainment that is not trying to inform you, but to distract you. And yeah, sure, there's a place for that. And to some extent, it's self-fulfilling. That is the media we consume. That is the media that we pay for. So that's the media we continue to get. But even when the documentary style stuff is watered down and made to seem like it's conspiracy theory, that's when I start to question the motivations, the ulterior reasons that somebody might be wanting to display something in a way that makes everybody think, well, that's ridiculous. No, I think that there's more than meets the eye to this world. There's certain things that we absolutely don't understand. I mean, try and explain electricity to somebody 150 years ago. It's not going to go very well, even though we had it. We had electricity 150 years ago. Go and explain it to some farmer living in Alabama.
And if I may, Aidan, just to add, in reverse too, people so quickly forget the past. Mm-hmm. Go ask your average person, tell me 5 facts about your great-great-grandpa.
Yep.
You're going to get deer in the headlights look, right? And that just speaks to how quickly the information is lost and why it's so important for us to continue to have these conversations and, frankly, to do what we're doing. I hate when people are like, well, you're going to waste your time in a podcast. It's like, we're having a conversation to document, like, history, to document reality, to document what's actually...
As a historian, this is the best period ever.
Right.
Like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, I have the historians of the future are going to have so much material to work with. I mean, almost probably too much material. There's going to be a PhD student assigned to like every single podcast that ever happened. I do not envy them because most of the podcasts out there are not very good, but...
Yeah, well, your average podcast also never gets past 10 episodes. So that speaks to... We're at 757-ish. So I guess we're doing
we had our 100th like a few weeks ago. Which is cool, but
man. And you guys are crushing it, by the way. And how about this? This is a segue to, as we're wrapping things up here, folks, please go support Aidan at the Lore Lodge. Like, you guys are absolutely crushing it over there. You've been working your asses off and it's paying off. You guys are getting hundreds of thousands of subscribers. You're getting millions of views. You guys are absolutely crushing it. So please tell us where folks can go ahead, support you guys, follow you on social media, but also, support the Lore Lodge. Give us a little bit more background there, and where can folks go ahead and support you there?
Sure. So for the Lore Lodge, the most direct way people can support is we have a Patreon profile that is just the Lore Lodge. You can subscribe for as little as $1 a month. That is, that compounds and it's huge and it's awesome. So thank you to everybody who currently does that too. But that's the most direct way. If you want to follow us, we are the Lore Lodge on YouTube, the Lore Lodge on Instagram, the Lore Lodge on Twitter. We're the Lore Lodge basically everywhere. And then me personally, I am at the Aidan Mattis, which is spelled the same way as you see on your screen right now, or at Aidan Mattis on Twitter.
Is it Twitter? Is it x.com? Aidan, what is it? I hate the fact that they changed it because now I did see, though, by the way, did you see Elon's tweet about the possible the middle ground, the Twitter bird into the X?
I could do that.
It
or Twitter by X. That would have been the easy option.
Here, keep talking for a second. I'm gonna pull this up really quick.
Like, I get what he was doing. I get the thought process, or like the X app, but I think getting rid of all the Twitter specific stuff was not a good idea. Like the retweet and
it's a brand, man.
It's a brand, and I get what he's doing, but it is all very. I think this is where and I say this is somebody who has a tendency to do the same kind of things. I think this is where his autism gets to him. It's like he had this idea and he stuck with it, and he is now completely dead set on achieving it, and nothing will stop him. And I've been there myself, so I get it. But
app bird, I think he may have deleted the tweet he had. But it looked legit. It was the X logo, but with one one part of the X line was the Twitter bird, like kind of doing this like Phoenix looking thing. Actually looked good. I thought it looked good, and now I can't find it unless it was a parody and I got trolled, which could have happened. But if that was the case, maybe Elon should take some advice because it looked like a really good logo. But anyways, yes, go ahead, please, folks, support the Lore Lodge, support Aidan. Please follow yours truly also on Twitter /x.com, as well as on Facebook at B Nichols Liberty. And while we are demonetized here on the YouTubes, we are not demonetized over on Facebook. What? I know. Surprise, surprise. I go from 3 years ago being this close to losing my page and having it unpublished over on Facebook to them actually saying, yeah, we can monetize you. Why not? So if you want to go ahead and give us some was it Facebook stars or something, you can go ahead and do that, or support the show over on our Patreon, become a $5 or $10 a month supporter, or you can go ahead and give us a one-time donation over there as well, briannicholsshow.com/support. And by the way, I do have to go ahead and give a shout out to today's sponsor, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. Our sponsor today is our store, which is supported by Proud Libertarian, and here you can go ahead and get our Liberty Legends shirt. If you look at our shirt here on the YouTube, Rumble, or Sovereign streams as you're watching here today, you'll see on your screen right now a lot of noted Liberty Legends like Ron Paul, Thomas Sowell, Murray Rothbard, Walter Williams, and more. So if you want to go ahead and get your Liberty Legends shirt, head over to briannicholsshow.com/shop. It'll bring you right over to a Proud Libertarian store where you can grab your shirt or anything else we have over there. Swag beyond what I can explain here on the air today. Bumper stickers, backpacks, hats, all that and more. Just use code TBNS at checkout for 15% off of your order. Folks, thank you for joining Aidan and I. And also, folks, by the way, I mentioned YouTube, Rumble, and Sovereign. If you are joining us over there, please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe button, and also little notification bell so you miss a single time we go live. And by the way, if you are joining us over on Sovereign, SOVREN, well, congratulations. You're seeing today's episode before anybody else. That's your Sovereign exclusive, and I am a big fan of Ben Swan's independent media entity that is Sovereign, so if you have not checked it out yet, please go ahead and do so. Aidan, thank you for joining us, and folks, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you sticking around and sticking, yes, as we go through our Conspiracy Corner, all things UFOs, Skinwalkers, and more. So with that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Aidan Mattis. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.